One thing I have no shortage of are old computers. Like my Dell Optiplex 7010 I was lambasted for still using in my video review of Topaz Labs Video Enhanced AI software. Or this Dell Latitude E6500 that, to this day, still receives ample comments from people wanting to know what drivers I use to upgrade it to Windows 10. And I can't even answer that question anymore because it's no longer running Windows 10, but Windows 7 Professional. Though that will have to change very soon as Google Chrome has finally ended support for Windows 7. But it's still getting Windows updates. I also have my HP Stream laptop I reviewed many months ago, which is essentially a glorified netbook. This 2009 MacBook has pretty much every other machine beat when it comes to beauty contests, but as far as what's under the hood, well, that's where it falls short. As I detailed in my video titled 2009 MacBook Meets 2023, but everything goes wrong almost, well, going off the title alone, you can deduce what happened with my trying to use this machine here in 2023. These were great machines in their time and for many years thereafter, but these days they just can't cut the mustard, which is what I unfortunately discovered in that video. If this thing looks familiar, that's because it is. This was featured in a video of mine around this time last year, wherein I opined about my experiences upgrading the machine to Windows 10. But at that time, this was not my machine. I was prepping it for the future owner. But just recently, this past Christmas, they decided to get a MacBook, and that left this Dell Precision up for adoption. And of course, how could I turn down a business-grade PC that hails from around the same time as my 2009 MacBook? One thing you'll hear echoed time and time again is if you have your sights set on like an old MacBook from 2009 or 10, that if you broaden your horizons and start looking at business-grade laptops from the same time, you will get arguably a lot more bang for your buck. So it's only natural I couldn't turn down the enticing offer of getting this thing back. Take a long look at some of the input and output connections on both the MacBook and the Precision. That's a 6-pin FireWire port. There's also microphone and headphone jacks just like you get on an older MacBook. 2 USB 2.0 ports on this side, an SD card slot, a slot-loading optical drive, a PC card, smart card slot, and on the other side we get another USB 2.0 port, an eSATA port which doubles as yet another USB 2.0 port, VGA, display port, Ethernet, a physical switch for disabling all wireless connections on the machine, also a WPS button, and an express card slot, which is a great feature to have because now I can add USB 3.0 support to this machine through the use of an express card to USB 3.0 adapter card. Ignoring the obvious difference in size, the Precision M6400 has quite a bit going for it, and I'm not talking about Windows Vista that it would have shipped with originally. No, I'm talking about its Core 2 Quad. Core 2 Quads are nothing to shake a stick at these days, but compared to the MacBook's 2.13 GHz Core 2 Duo, it is leaps and bounds better. And of course, because this is a business-grade PC, we have some features that you wouldn't find on consumer-oriented computers of the time, such as a fingerprint reader, smart card abilities, or a docking-based connector on its underside. Of course, with this machine having removable batteries, it's easy to stock up so you're never left in the dark when the battery that you're using happens to give up the ghost. I have not one, not two, but 3 extra batteries for it. Though I will admit that this one on the right side gives us some kind of a weird battery indicator that I've never seen before, and even though it's a genuine Dell battery, it has given up the ghost and does not work correctly. And something that's very nice about this particular laptop is the ease with which you can upgrade it. Get a regular Phillips screwdriver and remove not 1, but 2 Phillips screws holding this back access panel in place. And if we were looking to upgrade the hard drive, which is what I ended up doing, you don't need to go any further. In fact, you don't even need to remove those 2 Phillips screws because you just remove the 2 screws here holding the hard drive caddy in place, and you can lift up and pull this hard drive and caddy out. It'll just pivot up and then you pull it straight out, so you don't even have to access what's behind this panel to get at it. The hard drive it originally came with was this Western Digital Scorpio Black 320 GB 7200 RPM drive, and that's why I ended up using one of these Black Friday freebies I scored from Micro Center. It's a 256 GB inland SSD, and I cloned the hard drive over to the SSD. And now just by sliding and removing this panel, we have access to everything and anything that we'd ever want to do to this machine. And we also have not one, but two hard drive bays. That's right, because Dell considered this a mobile workstation, they took into consideration the fact that you'd likely need to have two hard drives on this thing. Now this machine didn't come with this caddy originally, but I was able to source it from eBay for around $10 shipped. You got the caddy, the screws, and more importantly than anything else, the little crossover connector, because you can't just take a 2.5-inch hard drive, wedge it in here with cardboard shoring it up, and make contact with the SATA and power connection on the motherboard. It will not work. You need this connector right here to make the magic happen. And thankfully this caddy came with it. A lot of the caddies I saw for sale did not include that very important connector. So over here is the boot drive, and over here is my storage drive for archiving videos to that I capture using FireWire. This is a 720 gigabyte drive sourced out of a retired Dell laptop. So I will eventually upgrade this to an SSD as well, but for now it's good enough. I have yet to look into upgrading the RAM, although I do believe it's maxed out, as discussed in my original review of this machine, with a total of 16 gigabytes. It's my understanding that there's two different places where the RAM resides on this machine, right up here, and then also behind the keyboard. One thing the previous owner had mentioned to me, which has since been resolved off camera, is the cooling fans going up to full speed. And when I say full speed, it sounded like you were in a whirlwind. When I got in here, this thing looked like it was covered in a fuzzy blanket of dust, and after blowing out the heatsink cooling fins and the two fans and just about everything else that I could get to, now the thing actually will sit there and almost be 100% quiet. Eagle-eyed viewers might have spied this mysterious looking slot titled FCM, and that slot is for what is known as a flash cache module, which is a memory module that would have come with the computer from Dell and would cache frequently used files off of the mechanical hard drive and load them into the flash cache module. And that will improve battery life and of course speed, because those files will now be cached to flash memory and not a mechanical hard drive. So this functionality is otherwise referred to as Intel's turbo memory. And it's my understanding that you can actually buy M-SATA cards that will go into the FCM slot and give you M-SATA capabilities on a machine as old as this. Of course though, be prepared to pay a pretty penny. Fortunately, unlike my Latitude E6500, the CMOS battery is still working and doesn't need to be replaced. Now moving back over to the dock connector, that's a great feature to have, especially for a computer like this that was intended to be a mobile workstation that could quite possibly replace your desktop. And this is the dock that you can use with the computer. This turns it essentially into a desktop in the way that you can have everything routed into the back of this, and when you're ready to go, you just disconnect your laptop from the dock. This is model number PR02X. This is the older ePort Plus. There's also an ePort Plus 2, the 2 giving you USB 3.0, whereas this one only has USB 2.0. But on the left side you get 3 USB 2.0 ports, a headphone and microphone jacks, a lock over here for preventing the laptop from being able to be released from the dock, PS2 keyboard and mouse ports, more USB 2.0 jacks, Ethernet, eSATA, some kind of a connector for use with a video breakout cable, probably for a composite output or similar, parallel printer, serial VGA, 2 HDMI outputs, and 2 DisplayPort outputs, as well as your power input over here. Blue button lights up over here to indicate power, and also the ability to eject this thing from the dock if the need should arise. Regrettably, the built-in speakers on this machine are a bit ragged and rough around the edges, and by that I mean they're blown out. They sound absolutely horrible, but to replace them, I can't find just the speakers themselves. I'd have to buy the whole palm rest assembly that the keyboard mounts to, just for the speakers. If I extinguish all the lights, you might be able to see that this thing has a very nice backlit keyboard. It's quite nice to have a full-size number pad, as well as dedicated buttons for muting and adjusting the volume, and calling up the calculator. Here we are on the desktop. Windows 11 is running on here, miraculously. Those people that lamented about Microsoft's removal of being able to access Task Manager by right-clicking on your taskbar can finally rejoice. They've since re-added Task Manager to the right-click option of your taskbar. Even though the Core 2 Quad is getting rather elderly these days, it can certainly hold its own, and compared to the Core 2 Duo in the MacBook, well, it's leaps and bounds better. Running an SSD is pretty much a necessity with Windows 10 and 11. As I mentioned before, the main boot disk running Windows is an SSD, though the secondary drive is occupied by a mechanical hard drive. You might have also noticed that I had this USB TP-Link dongle. That's actually for Wi-Fi. That's because this machine has a ridiculously out-of-date and slow Dell 1397 wireless mini card, and the thing is, I think, capable barely of managing wireless G speeds. It was absolutely pitiful in the speed department. So there was absolutely no question about it that it needed to be fixed and remedied, and that was done through the use of the TP-Link USB adapter. The built-in Bluetooth module is working. To make that happen, I had to download a Bluetooth driver for a Lenovo ThinkPad. So if you're in need of getting Bluetooth working on your Precision, that's the version of the software that I had to use. If you take to Google and put that in, I'm sure you'll come up with the right file. The Bluetooth does work, although not very well, going off my testing, and I suspect it's because of the very old version of Bluetooth that it's using. I think Bluetooth 3, Bluetooth 4.0, and the devices that I tried using it with use what I believe is Bluetooth 5, and that causes the audio to be very poor quality and very choppy. But hey, it works. Never would have guessed that we could get Bluetooth from Windows Vista era hardware to work in Windows 11. I also have quite the collection of software on this machine because I'm intending to use it as pretty much a secondary desktop replacement to my primary PC for all of my video capture, editing, rendering, and archival purposes. One thing that actually ended up working out, as I believe I discussed in that original review video of this laptop, is that by installing all of the Dell supplied, what some would say is bloatware, but I say is a necessary evil, is by installing all that software before upgrading to Windows 10 and now Windows 11, the software was able to carry over now into Windows 11, like Dell's Smart Settings and Control Point utilities. If I tried to install these right now on Windows 11, there's a good chance that it would fail the installation even when trying to use compatibility mode. As I mentioned in the review of this and my Dell Latitude laptops, it is a necessity to install the Intel Rapid Storage Technology driver that Dell supplied for these machines. You might not think it's important, but it certainly is if you want to have audio that works correctly. Otherwise, you'll have issues with glitching audio and problems with buffer overruns and overflows, causing the audio to be a stuttery mess. The particular version that this laptop is running successfully is the version of Rapid Storage Technology 9.6.0.1014. Taking a stroll through Control Panel, we can see that there are many of the Dell bloatware utilities that are available, like Dell Battery Information, Broadcom Control Suite, the NVIDIA Control Panel for the NVIDIA graphics on here, and even utilities for the IDT audio, which are somewhat important because through the use of this utility we can enable acoustic echo cancellation and beamforming for the built-in microphone, and for playback we can enable EQ and SRS premium sound through the built-in speakers. Remember how I mentioned though about the speakers being blown out and needing to source a replacement set? Well, headphone users beware, this is what they sound like. Absolutely dreadful. For now, a much easier, cheaper, and agreeable solution comes in the way of a USB soundbar. This was some Amazon special a couple of months ago, a Cyber Acoustics soundbar. A bit of a staple on my channel is demonstrating the capabilities of retaining the Dell shortcut function keys with respective programs that the laptops would have shipped with. This is going to be no different. If I go ahead now and press function and the battery symbol, that will eventually queue up Dell's battery program on the screen. In fact, it has actually been called to action, although it's not in the foreground for some reason. And you can see this Windows Vista era Dell system software when they were going for emulating the Windows Vista theme. And we could see that the battery health is excellent. Similarly, if I press FN and the DCP button, Dell control point, and in my case smart settings pop up because I've installed both versions. I think control point predated smart settings, but I have both of them installed, so both of them pop up, and control point gives you a lot more control over things than smart settings, which just gives you these basic I guess you could say presets for outdoor mode, presentation mode, and turning off Wi-Fi. Whereas by using control point we can go over to connection manager. Oh boy, that speaker is horrible. Let's mute that. Could bring up Dell control point connection manager for managing Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and we could also go over to the security manager, in which case it shows that the smart card reader is enabled. So now, if all goes to plan, I should be able to put the dock there and hopefully have enough room to spare to install this on the dock. Gonna have to move that tape dispenser because that's in the way. And now have all the I/O routed into the back of the port replicator. The only thing that the dock is missing from its arsenal of ports is the 6-pin FireWire, but that's not too big a deal. It's the only thing I actually have to have plugged into the laptop and not the port. So certainly not the end of the world. The only thing I don't like about the dock is it's a little cattywampus at times. Like when you go to press the power button, it wants to lean to the side, and there's no way to resolve that. I guess, well, there is a way to resolve that, and that's by using the power button on the dock and not the laptop. It's the only problem with aftermarket batteries. This trim piece wants to fall off. I have to figure out a way to re-glue that to the plastic of the battery. I just couldn't resist. I ended up removing the entire back panel so that I could re-glue it properly, and you can actually see the individual cells that make up this battery. And this one over here does say Samsung. Now, with regard to a lot of people's desires to run Windows 11 on this machine or see a step-by-step tutorial, I can't give you that, but I can say that the transition from Windows 10 to Windows 11 was relatively seamless. I just had to download the Windows 11 22H2 64-bit version and take care of a few things behind the scenes to get Windows 11 to work on here, because it isn't technically supposed to run on an old machine such as this without Secure Boot, TPM 2.0, and all that other jolly good stuff. While not the fastest, latest, and greatest thing ever, the Core 2 Quad really helps things along, since what I'm primarily going to be using this machine for is capturing standard F and HD video from tape-based camcorders using either Scenializer or WinDV, and HDV split for the HDV camcorder tapes I have. I have a Sony Digital 8 Handycam over here that's going to call this area home for the foreseeable future. And I have the FireWire cable running from the laptop, and I can connect right up to the camcorder. Now I can use this laptop as another workstation for transferring my tapes into the computer. You can see that we're getting input right here from the camcorder, and I have the video folder that this is capturing to shared over the network, so all my videos are accessible from this machine so long as it's running. Being able to hardwire this and take advantage of the gigabit Ethernet port makes things so much faster. Not too sure what's going on with the write speeds as opposed to the read speeds according to Crystal Disk Mark, but perhaps it being a kind of no-name knockoff SSD has something to do with the matter. The only weird thing is if I go into Device Manager, there's this USB mass storage device that pops up with an exclamation mark next to it, and if I go to Properties, it says that the device cannot start. If I remember correctly, I believe that error was popping up when I first got the soundbar. Something about it is what's giving that error, but ignoring that, everything else is good to go. There's no exclamation marks, no nothing. Everything, all the drivers are installed. There are a couple of things that really don't work as they should. Like I just noticed that the touchpad scrolling stopped responding, and I just brought up the touchpad utility, and you click it and nothing happens. If you go to button settings it works, but if you go to touchpad settings nothing happens. So there's certain aspects that just don't work as intended. So to answer the million-dollar question, can Windows 11 run on a computer that's 14 or 15 years old, in this case a Dell Precision M6400? The answer is yes, but your mileage may vary.